I just want to first thank all of you for being there, for being present. I hope you enjoyed it, had a wonderful time enjoying the food and the activities, the cornhole tournament. I lost in the first round thanks to the Swift gentleman back there, and it was really my fault, not my partner's fault, but it was a great day last week. So I just want to thank especially the volunteers who made it possible. It's also a great joy just to see us filled in this church today. Just look out. I'm grateful that you're here, grateful that we can all praise the Lord, and it really is a blessing to be together and worship. I do have to confess something publicly. Yesterday, I went to a Michigan game. I know. I felt like I was in the wrong place, but I wanted to wear green so bad, but I didn't. And I had Father Russo sub for me yesterday evening, and when I asked him, I think it was a little manipulative because I know he's a Michigan fan. So when I told him the reason I needed him to help me last night, he was like, "Oh yeah, man, you go to that game. I'll be here." I learned 4 things though about Michigan. Number 1, the stadium is awesome. I have to admit, the stadium is pretty impressive. Number 2, well, this is more about the game. The Maryland quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa's brother, is pretty good. It's pretty good. Third thing I learned is Michigan is athletic. Holy cow. That's an athletic group of people. And the 4th thing is Spartan. I'm still about the Spartans. But I mention all of these things because, when you read sports news like I do, there's always these articles like 4 things we learned from this game, or 3 takeaways from this person's first experience on the field, or here's 4 reasons why the Lions are going to be bad again. There's always these lists. There's lists for top movies, Internet has all of these things. I'm going to give you a list today of the top 5 takeaways from our gospel, because there is so much here, so much. Number 1, the first thing that we should take away from this gospel, the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, is to acknowledge that we are all the rich man, every one of us. There's a book that I've been reading that I read a couple of years ago that talked about, and I don't have a way of verifying this to you, but I think it's a true stat. And this author said, and he was writing about Christian living and the requirements that we have towards those who are poor. He said that we live in a country where every one of us, no matter how wealthy we are here, are in the top 10% of wealth in the world. Every one of us. That may be shocking and surprising, but if you think about it, the whole world, we have all this access to plumbing, we have all of our bathrooms, we have easy access to food, and this is not so in many parts of the world. So it really isn't that surprising. So I think it's very clear for us that when we think about this parable, the rich man, Jesus is speaking to us. The only named person is Lazarus. The rich man is meant to be the common experience that we all have. How are we responding to the needs of others? Number 2, wastefulness. You saw in the parable that the rich man dined sumptuously, and Lazarus was there just hoping, longing that he could have the scraps from the table. If you've read The Hunger Games, you know that there's this one capital that has all of the wealth, all of the money, all of the nicest food, the choicest wine, everything. And the rest of the districts have nothing. They have to scrape and claw for every meal. What's interesting about this book, though, is there's this party that's thrown where other people from other districts are able to come to it, and all of the people in the capital are having this wonderful food, a wonderful party with all this great food and wine, and there's this wonderful little drink that if they take a sip of it, it'll allow them to eat even more after they're full. So after they've filled their bellies, they can take this drink and have more. while the rest of the district is suffering? Well, I think the question for us is very clear. How often do we waste things when there are so many people that are in great need? And again, I know I remember a high schooler of mine would say, don't waste water because there's people in other parts of the world who need that. And I know they don't have access to it, but there is a sense of our wastefulness is a problem, right? It is not being mindful of the needs of others. The third point, ignorance is bliss, isn't it? Ignorance is bliss. Last year I remember in one of my homilies talking about how awkward it is for me to see people at the side of the road with a sign asking for help, because I never know what to do, right? And after that homily, my little sister Holly said to me, "Stephen, it's really quite simple. Get them a $2 voucher to Dégagé Ministries." Now, she used to work for Dégagé, which is why she was aware of it, and that $2 voucher gets them at least 5 meals or something like it. Well, that's a simple way to acknowledge the person who is suffering, who is in need, and to help them. I thought, Holly, you're brilliant. I'll follow that. I'll do that. But how easy it is for us to just pretend they're not there. How easy it was for the rich man to pretend that Lazarus was not outside his door. So point number 3 is that we have to acknowledge those people who are in our midst suffering. Number 4, I think this is the hardest one. To always be aware and to never allow those who are poor to become a means to our happiness. Right? Those who are suffering to be the means by which we live a more comfortable life. That's exactly what the rich man does. You send Lazarus to go help me, right? Bring me water, right? He treats Lazarus like a servant. Then he wants to send Lazarus back to his brothers to save them. Lazarus is not even treated with dignity. He's just a servant in the rich man's eyes. Well, what's an example of this? I think a good example of this in our present world, and this is probably why it's so tough for us. How many places in the world are there factories and different types of things where people are working in conditions that are horrible, where their human dignity is not even honored? We have labor laws here in this country. Those labor laws don't exist in other places. I think one way that we can help our brothers and sisters throughout the world is by not participating in this consumerist style of living. And I'm preaching to myself here, to always think that I need the newest thing. Do we really need the newest thing? Maybe one way that we can help people who are in these really poor environments is by not purchasing all of these new things and perpetuating the abuse of and dignity of workers in other countries. And the final point is probably the most important one. This gospel must change us. It must make us uncomfortable. We hear that Abraham says to the rich man, if they won't listen to Moses and the prophets, they won't even listen to someone who rises from the dead. We must listen to what Jesus is saying to us today. Our conscience, man, I can't speak right now. Our conscience must be bothered. We must be bothered enough to change.